Okay, it's 1 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started today. All right, good afternoon, everybody. How was everyone's Thanksgiving break? It's been a while since I've seen you guys, huh?
Really good, yeah.
It's good. It's good. Yeah, it's Thanksgiving break is always a weird one because it comes so late for us, and like we're basically almost done with the semester, so it's almost like the calm before the storm. Okay. I spent Thanksgiving break editing your guys' or giving you guys feedback on your individual writing assignments. I think I have a couple late ones I still need to get to, but I plan to get to those this afternoon. But if you submitted your individual writing assignment on time, then the feedback, your score and your feedback should be there. So I basically gave you comments within Canvas itself. So if you kind of view your page, you should see little sticky notes where I've left kind of some feedback for you guys. And I've also given you just a comment with the rubric that's attached to it as well. So was everyone able to view like both the comments and the rubric that I posted for you guys?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so definitely, a lot of you guys' writing assignments were really good. Most of my comments were fairly minor, mostly just add more detail here or be a bit more organized. So I think generally, if you guys kind of keep up the quality of that writing for the final project, you guys are all going to be in really good shape. Okay. And so this week is actually going to be the last week of our lectures, and so we're going to be covering. I want to hopefully cover through computer ethics, but at the very least, we'll finish up organizational ethics today and do environmental ethics as well. And then if we have time, we'll do computer ethics after that. And then next week, we're just going to be spending all week just doing final presentations. And so we have 9 groups. And so just to remind you guys, your final presentation has to be 15 minutes. And I'm going to be really strict on that because it's, we have a lot of groups to get through, for the entire, just to make sure everyone gets a chance to present. So if every group does 15 minutes, then we'll kind of come in just at enough time to cover everyone, since we have 2 75-minute sessions. Okay, and so I've determined the order for the presentations using a very scientific method. Let me share with you guys. And that method here was random.org. Okay, so I basically just put in everyone's groups and I've just kind of randomized it. I randomized it 15 times too, just to make sure it's true random. And here is the order. So on next Tuesday, we're going to start out with, at the very least, the first 4 here. And so the Fukushima group, Facebook group, Deepwater Horizon, and wildfires. So you guys should be prepared to go on Tuesday for sure. And then if we have time, I would like to get deepfakes done on Tuesday as well, but it depends on how much time that we have. And then if you're in the bottom half here, so Boeing, Chernobyl, Hyatt Regency, and the Ford Pinto, you guys can be prepared to go on Thursday, okay? And so I really want to stress that you guys have to make it 15 minutes because otherwise we're just not going to have enough time. So if you guys can practice it at least once as a group beforehand, just to get the timing right, I think that would help a lot. So last year, last year I had less students, we had less groups. And so I had a couple groups go like 10 minutes over, and that was, back then it was kind of okay because we had less groups. But this time, since we have so many students and so many of you guys, I really need to be strict on the timing just to make sure everyone gets things in on time. Okay, and so either practice. It would be great if you guys can practice all as a group. But I know with how busy you guys are, that's tough to do. At the very least, practice your part just to make sure you say everything you need to before the time is up. Okay? And remember, for the final presentations, you don't have to be as detailed as you are in the report. So I'm generally going to be expecting you guys to write more detailed information in the final reports. But in the presentation, you should give enough detail to at least tell a good story about your case study. Because remember, I've seen all these case studies, but all your other classmates haven't seen them at all either. So definitely make sure that you cover enough information in the presentation to paint a good picture, but don't go overboard with the details just that you run over time. Okay. Are there any questions on that? I'll send the order. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. So the presentation is due when? we're gonna present, right? Like we submit it when it's our time.
Right. Yeah. So so if you want to modify the I won't collect the slides until Friday of next week. So if you
Oh,
want to modify the slides a little bit after your presentation, you can go ahead and do that. But I'll open up a submission so you can turn in the slides on Friday, and only one person in your group needs to turn in the slides.
all right then. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll post the order onto the onto Canvas as well, just so you have it. So I'll make an announcement and to have that so that you guys can know the order. Okay. All right. Any other questions on the final presentations? Okay. So remember, we have no final exam in this class, so it's just I just want you guys to focus on the final project. And I believe the final report from your group is going to be due on. Actually, I'm gonna double check just to make sure, so I don't say anything wrong.
I think it's December 18th, Thursday.
December 18th. Okay, great. So I think that's the date for our final where our final exam would be. Yeah, so the final report's gonna be due on the 18th at 11:59. Yes, I have that.
I thought it was the 20th. No, I probably missed.
On the specs that I have right here, it's on the 18th. But we can extend it to the 20th if you guys would like. So that's going to be the Sunday the 20th. So would you guys like that?
Yes, please.
Okay.
That would be nice. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So let's do it on the 20th then, because I don't anticipate I'll probably grade it until the following week. So so the final report will be due on the 20th, which is the Sunday after finals week at 11:59 p.m. And again, only one person turned it in, and that's important because I have turnitin.com turned on, and so if multiple people submit the report, then it's going to show up as the entire report is plagiarized. So I don't want that. So make sure just one person turn in the report. Okay. So that's the final project, and so today we're going to kind of pick up where we left off last time with organizational ethics. So I think last time we talked a lot about kind of the differences between engineers and managers and kind of what roles they play in companies. But today, we're going to talk more about organizational disobedience. Okay. And first off, I want to say that I really dislike this term because disobedience is something that you kind of use for like a little kid and their parents, right? But when you're talking about organizations and professional engineers, like you're talking about grown ass adults. So it never really sits right with me to say that if you don't like something that your company's doing, then it's disobedience, because your company is not your parent, and you don't really and you shouldn't view your company in the same way as your parents, because it's because you're an adult, right? And it's you shouldn't be expected to always obey what the company kind of wants you to do. Okay? And a lot of times you're going to be opposed to what either company or management wants you to do, right? And that's totally okay. So I mean, it's not you're not being a bad employee, or you're not being a bad person by not wanting to go along with what your company wants to do, because a lot of companies will do kind of a lot of shady things that you might not agree with. Okay? And I say this because I think there's generally a trend right now in a lot of companies where they say, oh, our company is kind of one big family, we all do this together and stuff like that, which sounds kind of nice and frou-frou kind of things, but sometimes that mindset can kind of pressure you into doing something that's you might not be kosher with. And so I'll tell you guys kind of a short story. Actually James told me this story a couple years back, where he used to work at this company, and it was, he felt like it was a great environment, like it's, very family, everyone's really close, they all hung out together and stuff like that. And then at a certain time, James wanted to quit the company because he wanted to form his startup, right? The one that he talked about in the, at the beginning of the semester. And then, like, almost overnight, it seems like, when James said, "Oh, I want to leave the company and start my own thing," for a lot of the other employees there, they started treating James like he was like dead to them, and they were very cold and kind of like, "Oh, you're betraying the company, you're betraying the family," kind of thing. And like, that's really terrible, because it's like, you work. At the time, James had worked there for a couple years, and he was, he really considered a lot of his coworkers as his close friends, and to see them like kind of turn on him like that was really kind of sad. So, but but like in that situation, like, James didn't do anything wrong. He was just, standing up for, or doing what he thought was best for his own life and his own career. And so, I guess the moral of the story is, like, you don't owe your companies anything, and no matter what kind of culture that they try to spin, like family stuff like that, you always got to look out for your own morals and your own goals, your own path in life. Okay, and so when you do come across these situations where you're not, where you don't agree with what the company's doing, there's ways that you can kind of engage in disobedience, or contrary behavior, I guess I should say. Right. And so the first way that we'll go over is disobedience by contrary action. Okay. And so in this case, what this means is that if you wish to engage in disobedience, this means that you actively participate in activities outside the workplace that are contrary to the interests of the company. Okay. So some examples of this could be taking part in like an environmental group that's working to, maybe protect some land that the company wants to buy, or maybe taking part in a political group that's counter to the company's goals or values. Okay? So these are ways that you can kind of spend. So basically, these are ways to kind of spend your free time. If you are opposed to something that the company is doing. Okay. And so number 2 here, we have disobedience by non-participation. Okay. And so this is pretty self-explanatory. So this is basically, if your company is asking you to do something or participate in a project that you personally don't agree with, or it goes against your ethics or your morals, you can just choose not to participate. And so these could be, you know, like we've been talking a lot about, you know, engineering ethics and engineering codes. And so that's, you know, obviously a great reason to choose not to participate in something. But a lot of these reasons might be personal too, that you just don't want to engage in. Right? And so some examples that might come up in engineering practice is that maybe you don't want to work on a project that has, you know, military applications, or, you know, it's you know, going to be used for a weapon or something like that. Okay. Or, you know, you might choose to not participate in a project that will, you know, contribute to, you know, some environmental harm that you're opposed to. Okay? And so that's totally okay, right? But of course, you know, this also comes with, you know, risks for your own career too, right? Because if you choose not to participate in a project, you know, you kind of put yourself at risk where the company, you know, might not see, you know, they might not be able to put you onto another project. Okay. And so a lot of times, you know, especially for the bigger companies, they'll at least try their best to accommodate you by putting you on projects that you feel okay with, and try to avoid those things. But sometimes it's unavoidable, and sometimes it's not always possible. You know, especially if you consider your skill set and what's and what you can be useful for. So so just be a little bit careful, and you know. But you know, always try to always know that this is an option for you as well. So you know, don't ever feel like you're ever forced to work on a certain kind of project. Okay. Okay. And so those are the first two. And then the third one is disobedience by protest. And so this is kind of the strongest form of disobedience. So this basically is if you feel so opposed to something that your company is doing that you actively speak out against it. Okay. And so some forms that protest can take is a strike. So I'm pretty sure, you know, everyone's heard of that. So, you know, refusal to work and stuff like that. Or another way that you can protest is you can whistleblow. And so what that means is that you can bring certain company actions to light to the public by alerting, you know, the media or other people so that they can kind of get involved in that. Right? And that's actually going to be the subject for the rest of this unit here. Is you know, how do we define whistleblowing? What does it actually mean? And what are some practical ways that you can do it to protect, you know, not only yourself, but also, you know, to best effectively, you know, prevent your company from doing some bad stuff. Okay. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay. All right. So let's go over whistleblowing. Okay. So let's define what a whistleblower is first. Right, so whistleblower is defined as one who reveals the wrongdoings within an organization to the public or those in positions of authority. Okay. Or in other words, you're going to make public some things within the company that might not have been public before. So the key part of this is that whistleblowing has to always come from someone within the organization. Okay. And so for the reason for this is that, because you're internal to the company, you're probably are aware of or know some details that, the general public doesn't really know. Okay. And so by whistleblowing, you're basically making these details public. Okay. Okay. But I think when people think of whistleblowing, they think of, you're going to the press and you're making, this huge kind of public scandal, public, and making kind of a really big public deal of it. But there's kind of levels to this. So there's ways to kind of bring this to whistleblower to bring things to light without having to go to like a really huge thing. So we're going to talk about kind of different types of whistleblowing that you can do to to bring light to certain issues without causing a really big scene. Because ultimately, what you want to accomplish with whistleblowing is you want to stop either your department or your manager or the company from doing something that you think is going to be really wrong. So thankfully for a lot of companies, there's some internal channels that you can actually leverage to whistleblow as well. Okay. And so let's go over that type of whistleblowing first. So let's go over internal whistleblowing. And so with internal whistleblowing, a complaint is often filed to someone within the company, usually outside your own department. Okay. And so internal whistleblowing is great for, relatively smaller issues that might be kind of localized to just your department or, just a few people that you work with. Okay. Because a lot of companies actually, they, as part of their legal requirements to do so, they actually have some internal employees that kind of deal with these issues. Okay. And so, the first thing that you can go through is HR, right? So HR stands for Human Resources. So if you have an issue with, your manager or one of your coworkers is, engaging in some, inappropriate behavior, then you can go to HR to rectify that issue. Or, if it's something engineering related or in terms of, your projects, there's also an ethics officer usually within the company that can handle these kinds of complaints. Okay. And so when you start working at a company, definitely seek out, or at least keep in mind, who these people are that are in your company. So if you ever do have a complaint, you know who to reach out to. Okay. And this is usually something that they'll throw at you during the orientation at the company. But if they don't, make sure you ask them just to make sure that you're aware of these of these resources. Okay? And a lot of times, these internal resources will help you, will actually, work pretty well. And actually, that's the most preferable way that the company prefers that you deal with these kinds of issues, because it's usually a company really wants to avoid any scandals getting out to the public. So if they can deal with them internally, that's usually the best way to go about it. And a lot of times, it actually helps. So sometimes, maybe a department or maybe a certain, employee is kind of getting out of hand. But once, some other people in the company are made aware of it, then they can kind of step in and correct their behavior, without a huge thing. Okay. But, there's one word of caution here, and this applies to both the HR and the ethics officers. And so even though it's their job to kind of deal with these kinds of issues, at the end of the day, these are companies that are still paid. These are still employees that are still paid by the same company. Right. And so if it's a situation where, they can, they can, choose, they have to choose between you and the company, they also have their own careers to take into mind too. So where if they do something that's against the interests of the company, then, the company might not hold on to them for as long as they would like to, right? And in fact, sometimes these officers are more interested in protecting kind of the public image of the company. They can kind of deal with things in kind of a certain way that may not be, that might kind of put a Band-Aid over the issue without solving the root. They might, they might go with that. Okay. And another thing to watch out for is that because these employees here, they work at the company, they're also exposed to the same kind of company culture and values as, as management and the rest of the company, which can affect their ability to kind of look at complaints from an objective point of view. So, just be aware of that. Okay. So if it's something, that you think might be resolved in-house, I would definitely at least try this first. But keep in mind that a lot of times what HR and what these ethics officers might find might not be the resolution that you're looking for. Because at the end of the day, they're still employed and they're still they're still paid for by the company. Okay. All right. Any questions on this? Okay. Okay. So that's internal whistleblowing. So now let's go over external. And so external whistleblowing means that you basically go outside the company to file your complaint. Okay? And usually what the outside agencies that you go to are either the press or you go to some regulatory agency. Okay. And I'll say that this is usually something that you go towards, after you exhaust some internal channels. Okay. And if you are going to an outside source, you can either do this openly or you can do it anonymously. Okay. Okay. And a lot of times, this will help you too, because a lot of times you might not want your identity to be revealed because the company might retaliate against you, or if you're working within a relatively small field, that might affect your prospects at the next job as well. Okay. And so just be careful of that. And make sure if you're going to the press or you're going to some regulatory agency, make sure that you say that you want to do this anonymously. Okay. Okay. All right. And so once you get to this part right here, if you are going outside, just kind of be ready and just be prepared that it's probably going to end up being a relatively big case. It might not reach national news, but it'll at least cause a lot of upheaval and a lot of turmoil in your life. So it's just kind of be prepared for that. But a lot of times this is the only path that you have to take, just to make sure that either you aren't taking part in something that you don't agree with, or you feel is unethical, or the company doesn't engage in something that's unethical as well. Okay. And so with that said, because whistleblowing is kind of a big deal, and a lot of times it goes against the goals of your company, you usually have to have a strong justification to do so. Okay. And so, I'm going to give you guys some example, good justifications to do that. So the first one could be just to prevent harm to the public, right? Right? Because remember, as engineers, we have a first responsibility to protect, the health and the welfare of the people that use our products in the general public, right? So if you feel like your company is engaging in some kind of behavior, either by, releasing a product that, can cause harm to people, you have a responsibility to speak up and do something about it, okay? Okay. So another big issue that you might want to whistleblow against is if there's a lot of extreme fraud that's taking place. Okay? Right? And so fraud is a very general term, but a lot of times this could be the company's either taking part in some shady financial deals to that are maybe against the law in order to help with their profits too. So if that's the case, and you don't see the problem being resolved with internal channels, then this is a way to this is something that you can do. Okay? And a third example that I'll give that'll kind of lead into our discussion, maybe at the end of today, but on Thursday for sure, is if you see some extreme environmental consequences as a result of your company's actions too. And so these are just 3 examples. So you don't have to wait for one of these to whistleblow, but these are these are kind of the general big things that people end up whistleblowing about in engineering companies. But if you see something that you think is obviously wrong, that's not part of this list, definitely don't be afraid to speak out. Okay, right. And just be aware that if you are going to whistleblow, and we'll talk about kind of practical advice for this in a little bit. Try to gather as much documented evidence as possible. Okay. Okay. Because any evidence that you can find will only help to to boost your case. Okay. Okay. And so those are kind of the big 3 or some big 3 reasons to that you would engage in whistleblowing. But another good reason to do so, even if even if it's not that big, is that if you do whistleblow, you kind of get the additional benefit to avoid complicity in any wrongdoing. Okay. Okay. And so what that means is that if you're even if you're not directly involved with a certain project that's ethically wrong or morally wrong, the fact that you didn't speak out on something can be used as a case against you. Because people can basically ask, if you were aware of these things going on in the company, why didn't you do anything about it? Okay. And so by whistleblowing, by raising some complaints either internally or externally, that's kind of a way for you to show, either for legal proceedings or for other stuff, that you were not okay with certain things that were going on in the company. Okay. And so even if it's not directly involved with your department or your project, if you see something that's going on, it's always good to kind of raise complaint about it, just to show that you're personally not okay, and you don't get caught up in any kind of consequences or collateral damage that might occur from that. Okay. Okay. Another thing that's important is that you can also whistleblowing is not just restricted to just your own company, but you might blow the whistle on something that's being done by either a partner or a customer. because a lot of engineering companies, they work together with other ones just because it's, you know, it's hard for one company to have all the expertise that they need to. And so, you know, by engaging and interacting with other companies, you become aware of some of their, of how they work and how they work on projects. So if you see something that, you know, another company is doing that you think is unethical, you can definitely still, you know, whistleblow for that as well, just to make sure that they're not putting people in danger or, you know, engaging in any kind of fraud. Okay. And you know, I'm going through all this today not to kind of scare you guys that, you know, that companies are going to do bad stuff when you get out there. You know, I hope and I pray that, you know, none of you would ever have to be in a situation where you would have to do this. But you know, I just want you to kind of be aware of, you know, what are the tools and what are some of the consequences that you can expect, you know, if you do engage in this kind of behavior, just so that you're mentally and kind of emotionally ready for, you know, all these things that can occur. Okay. All right. Any questions on this? Okay. Okay. And so let's go over some actual practical advice for whistleblowing. Okay. And so if you are going to whistleblow, you know, these 5 points will help you kind of do it in a way that will get you the results that you want and also kind of protect yourself at the same time. Okay. All right. So number one is to try to, you know, when you first see an issue, you know, at least try to take advantage of some internal channels, you know, before you go public. And so, you know, basically try to settle this internally before, you know, making kind of a bigger deal out of it. So, you know, I know we talk about HR, we talk about the ethics officers, but, you know, at the very least, you know, at least talk to your manager first about any issues that you might have, right? Because a lot of times, you know, your manager is there to help you, and, you know, they might not be fully aware of, you know, some of the consequences or some of the issues that you see. And so, you know, before you go even to HR or even to your ethics officers, you know, talk to your manager first, you know, and I would say like 95% of the time, hopefully, then they're going to be willing to work with you on certain issues to try to resolve them. Okay. But if not, you know, if your manager is not going to be listening to you, or if your manager is the problem, you know, then you can start going to HR, or you can go to ethics officers, you know, to lodge some official complaints. Okay. And so number two. Is to determine whether it's best to keep things confidential or to involve other people. Okay. And so for some issues, you know, this is just to make sure that, you know, everyone's privacy is kind of taken into account. So, you know, sometimes it's best to kind of deal with things as privately as possible, just to make sure that, um, that's usually the best way. But sometimes you might need to get other people involved, you know, either the press or a regulatory agency, just to make sure that, you know, things happen the way that you want. Okay. Okay. And so number 3 is, you know, kind of a reminder of something that we talked about before, is to, when you're lodging these kinds of complaints, focus on the issues, not the personalities or the people. Okay? And so, with this, I would say that it's important to separate people's actions from people's person, right? And so remember, when you're lodging these complaints, most of the time you're going to be doing them because you don't agree with certain action that either your management or the company is making. But that's different than saying that, this other person is a bad person, or, or they don't care about, certain things, right? Try to focus your complaints on just, the issues and the actions. And I think everyone will kind of be in a better mood for that, right? Because if you start attacking people's, personalities or their person, people tend to get defensive, right? So if you call someone like a heartless monster, that's going to elicit, a certain kind of response, rather than saying, I think, this thing that you're doing or this action that you're taking is going to harm people, right? So if you kind of go with that second route, you're much more likely to get a better, rational, civilized discussion, rather than, just calling people names. Okay, so number four. So number four is to keep as many written records as possible. Okay. Remember, you want everything to be documented as much as you can, because you can bring up that documentation for any kind of case that might be settled, right? And so any communication that you have with your your managers or the company, make sure you have it in writing, just so that you can show, these are the complaints that I lodged at this date, at this time, right? And that I did try to resolve this internally before going outside. Okay, and it's also just good from an organization, just to keep yourself organized. Just to kind of remember, I said this at a certain time, and our manager said this. Just so that you kind of keep your story straight. So keeping a written record always helps with these things. Okay. And so number five, when you are, raising objections or raising complaints, always try to give positive suggestions for improvement. Okay. And so it's not enough. It's, of course, this is not a requirement. So, you don't have to basically run a company, you don't have to make decisions at the company level and tell them how to run a company ethically, right? But when you can, it always helps to say, I think it would be better if we do it this way, rather than just saying that what you're doing is just wrong, right? So that's kind of just, good advice kind of in general, where, if you want someone to change their behavior, it's not enough to just say that what you're doing is wrong. It's much better to say, I think this is what you should do to be better. Okay. Because people, people are much more likely to kind of hear what you're trying to say if you try to present it in a constructive way and suggest improvements, right? And so, that's not always possible, but it always pays to try to be as constructive as you can, just so that everyone is kind of feels good about it. Okay. Okay. And so I'm not, with these 5 points here, I'm not saying that if you follow them, it's always going to go smoothly. Anytime you engage in whistleblowing, it's not going to be a pretty process. But at the very least, if you follow these 5 pieces of advice, you should at least have no reservation of like, I did something wrong or anything like that. If you follow these 5 pieces of advice here, then at the very least, you can say that you did everything that you could to act ethically and professionally as much as you can, to try to resolve things and try to make sure that, people or the environment or, don't get hurt or fraud doesn't take place. Okay. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay. All right. So that's it. So that's it for organizational ethics. And so now we're going to move on to environmental ethics. So kind of a big shift, but not totally unrelated. Okay. And so when I say environment, what I mean is basically the natural environment. So, nature and the oceans and all that stuff. Okay. Okay. And so I'll start by saying that engineers kind of have a complicated relationship with the natural environment. Okay. On the one hand, a lot of the machines and a lot of the devices that have played a role in a lot of the environmental problems that we have were designed by engineers. And it's not that that they designed these machines with the intent to hurt the environment, or they designed them to make money or anything like that. But people oftentimes, businesses ask engineers to design a certain machine, and it just so happens that the consequences of using those provided some harm to the environment, so either through pollution or a lot of other things. Okay. But on the other hand, engineers are one of the few groups of people that can that have the potential to have the most positive impact on the environment as well. Because engineers, we have a very unique set of technical skills that allow us to design devices or design machines to either protect the environment, or we can design processes that that reduce or eliminate the environmental impacts of some of the more harmful things that occur today. Okay, and so we kind of have this almost like with great power comes great responsibility kind of thing. Engineers, we can design machines and devices that have just a really big impact on the environment, either positive or negative. And that's that's a very unique position that not a lot of people have. Okay, and so with that said, I do want to kind of gauge your guys's or turn the question to you guys a little bit, because I environmental things I feel like change almost day to day, right? I think we're going through a very unique time with the environment right now because of COVID. A lot of people aren't driving as much anymore, so actually the air pollution is actually in a better state now than it kind of ever was. But besides that, I just want to ask you guys, if what kinds of environmental issues have you seen in the news, or what have you heard about recently that are that are interesting to you, and what role do you think engineers can play in either solving this or or help reducing it as much as possible? So why don't you think about it for a little bit, maybe search Google a little bit, and then anytime you come up with something, go ahead and just shout it out.
I saw something recently that the like places in China are starting to experience oily water, like in Flint, Michigan, where they were starting to light their tap water on fire.
Oh wow, that's I haven't heard that one. That's scary. All right, so you see one in the chat, people wanting to shut down oil companies. Yeah, so that's that's been a constant battle. I think the fossil fuel companies out there and the big oil companies. There's always a big battle with that. And with the administration, most likely changing, there's going to be a big shift in how we view that as well. That's definitely a really big one. Yeah. Anything else that you guys have been hearing on the news about anything environment related? It doesn't have to be, maybe not engineers, but noise pollution. Yeah, that's a really good one. And I think that's an issue that maybe not a lot of people think about too. Is that, you know, we have, you know, we produce a lot of noise and light too, actually, that you know, that affect the environment as well. That's a really good one. Yeah, so it's so there's a lot of issues, and I think, you know, I think we live in a time now where, you know, we're kind of made aware of a lot of these things, and, you know, hopefully, you know, we can make these things for the better. But there's a lot of things that you know, a lot of places where engineers and just, you know, the general public can do to make an impact. Okay. And so from here, you know, I think the fair question to ask is, you know, now that we've kind of established that, you know, engineers can have a big impact on the environment, what professional obligations do we actually have in terms of the environment? And so at the time when I wrote these notes, it was actually very interesting that the professional engineering codes actually didn't say all that much about the environment. And so they might have been revised by now. I haven't taken a careful look in a while. But, you know, when these codes were first written, you know, they were written kind of with the express intent of just, you know, protecting human safety. Okay? Okay. And so any effects, any statements in the professional codes that have to do with the environment are viewed through a lens of human health, right? And so basically the engineering codes are only concerned about the environment as much as it harms humans. Okay? And so, of course, you know, that picture is changing nowadays because we're seeing kind of the effects of climate change and global warming, right? And those are going to have big impacts on human life. You know, but when the codes were kind of first written, you know, that connection between the natural environment and human safety was not as clear. Okay? Right? And kind of the really complicating issue with that is that a lot of these environmental effects and environmental problems don't have a direct effect on human life right now, but it could have some significant effects farther into the future. And so since a lot of these issues don't directly affect humans right now, you know, it's a little bit of a difficult case to make sometimes to say, you know, what's the engineer's kind of responsibilities towards this. All right, any questions on this? Okay. Okay. And so with regards to the environment, you know, a lot of the actions that engineering companies have made usually have been a direct result of, you know, federal laws being passed. Okay? And so let's talk about that for a little bit. So let's talk about federal laws and the environment. Okay. And so, you know, a lot of times this any laws that get passed by the federal government usually comes in the form of, you know, regulations on environmental protections. Okay? and it's not just the federal government too. So state governments also have their own, usually their own environmental laws to kind of protect certain things as well. And so I'm going to go over just some landmark policies that that have affected these kinds of things. Okay. All right. So let's start in 1969. And so in 1969, Congress passed the National Environmental Policy Act. Okay. So this was one of the most important environmental laws in history. Okay. And a direct quote from this act basically declared that, basically said it was a national policy which will encourage productive and enjoyable harmony between man and his environment. Okay. And it does this by assuring all Americans safe, healthful, productive, and aesthetically and culturally pleasing surroundings. Okay. And so those are basically the goals of the National Environmental Policy Act. So it was kind of a really big sweeping piece of legislation, with kind of the goal of protecting the environment for Americans. Okay. And as a direct result from this act, Congress established the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA. Okay. And the main job of the EPA was to basically, take the National Environmental Policy Act and enforce its mandate. So, the EPA, those are going to be the main ones that are in charge of writing federal laws that regulate, what companies can, or what companies and people can and can't do, in order to protect the environment. Okay. you know, and the EPA still stands today, you know, and of course, you know, it's depending on the administration, you know, the power of the EPA, you know, changes, you know, here and there, but, you know, its goals still kind of remain the same. Okay, so that's the National Environmental Policy Act. So that was kind of the first kind of really big piece of federal legislation that was passed. Okay, and then after, you know, after the Environmental Policy Act, just 1 year later, Congress passed what was called the Clean Air Act. Okay. So this is in 1970. And so in 1970, you know, yeah, the Clean Air Act was passed. And so the goal of the Clean Air Act was to place regulations on pollutants that enter the air. Okay. So this act basically was responsible for you know, balancing the costs and the benefits with, you know, dealing with hazardous pollutions. Okay, and so as you can imagine, you know, a large piece of the Clean Air Act had to deal with automobiles, because automobiles is kind of a big contributor to our air pollution. Okay, okay, and then the last one that we'll go over together occurred in 1990. So, you know, relatively recently, right? And so in 1990, you know, what was passed was the Pollution Prevention Act. Okay. And so the Pollution Prevention Act was important because it kind of shifted the focus on, you know, of how we deal with, you know, the environment. Okay? Because before 1990, you know, the stance that the government and the companies usually took was that we just had to manage our pollution. You know, and at the time that was thought to be enough to kind of prevent, you know, pollution from getting out of control. Okay, but with the passing of this act, the shift kind of changed for, you know, it's not enough to just simply manage our pollution, but, you know, what we need to do is we need to just prevent it from happening in the first place. And so I think that after this, you know, recycling kind of became a really big thing. So, you know, so I grew up in the 90s, so I was actually born in 1990. I remember a lot of the children's programming at the time, you know, like Bill Nye the Science Guy and all those, you know, all those shows, which, you know, all for some reason seem to be filmed on the streets of San Francisco. You know, they all kind of reinforce, you know, the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. So, you know, that was kind of the big paradigm shift that we kind of had in 1990, where, you know, not only do we need to kind of manage our pollution, but if possible, you know, the best thing to do is just to make sure that no trash or no pollutants actually enter the environment to begin with. Okay, because the best pollution is no pollution. Right? Okay. Any questions on these pieces of legislation here? Okay. And so the next part, you know, I think we'll start it, but I do want to do an activity, but I want to make sure you guys have enough time for it. So I think we'll do it next time, okay? And so, you know, even though we have these, all these laws and all these regulations, you know, a lot of times, you know, they're not super clear. So a lot of times it comes to a court decision to determine, you know, how these laws should be interpreted and applied in practice. So there's actually a lot of really, influential court decisions with regards to, engineering companies and the environment. Because even though all of these laws and all these regulations, even though they seem great in theory, right? So generally people want to protect the natural environment. Everything always comes with a cost. And so oftentimes, by implementing governmental regulations, this always comes at a financial cost to the company. Okay. And if there's one thing that we know about companies, they really don't like financial costs. Okay. And so, as you can imagine, after the EPA was established, and all these laws and all these regulations started coming to bear, a lot of these companies started suing the government, for what they thought to be unfair, unfair economic burdens on their company. Okay. And this is especially, within the context of, a lot of times, with these environmental issues, the exact health risks are not known to, to a high level of certainty. Okay. 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 Because a lot of the environmental risks, at least with regards to how they affect people, they're based on scientific models that are forming predictions on how these effects will occur, right? And even though these models are very well researched, and they're they have a lot of scientific backing behind them, at the end of the day, it's still just a prediction. So a lot of these companies kind of argue, or a lot of the crux of their argument is that the companies are kind of if they implement regulations, these companies will bear kind of real consequences and real um, it'll have a big impact on them today over something that may or may not occur in the future, right? And of course, it's not as that kind of oversimplifies the issue, because it's a lot of times these environmental issues are it's not like it's a coin flip. So we say that it's uncertain, but it's sometimes it's like a 98% chance that certain things are going to occur. But that's kind of the argument that people make, right? And so kind of what these companies will argue is that any kind of responsible regulation that the government sets, not only does it have to take into account, yes, of course it has to take into account the health of the public and the health of the workers, but it also must protect the financial viability of the certain industries. And, that sounds kind of like a statement of, we're just kind of protecting money, at the cost of the environment. But, it's a lot more complicated than that, because, a lot of these companies, they employ people who really depend on that kind of work, to feed their families and to put, money and to put food on and to put a roof over everyone's heads, right? And so by enforcing, kind of, really strict regulations, the company might not be able to pay all these workers, because they have to pay a lot in those regulations. And, the thing is, with a lot of these workers, a lot of them, belong to a generation where, this might be the only thing that they know how to do, right? They might only know how to, mine coal, which, of course, we know about all the negative, health benefits there are to that. But, if that person loses their job, then, that's going to be a big impact on him and, her and their family, right? So it's tricky, it's not always kind of a black and white thing. And, when I think kind of the best solutions that are out there kind of, try to kind of protect, everything as much as possible, or at least kind of give a process on which, to protect these kinds of things. Okay. And so, I don't want to move on past this, because I do have kind of a fairly big activity next. And because in the next activity, what I want you guys to do, I'm going to split you guys up into groups, and I'm going to give you guys a certain, relatively, influential court case that occurred, that affected engineering and the environment. So I have 6 of them here, but we only have 3 minutes left in the lecture, and that's not enough time to go through that. So, I think I'll end this here for today. And then Thursday, we'll pick this up here and we'll look at the court cases, and then we'll finish up these lecture notes and also move on to computer safety. Okay. All right. So that's all. So that's all I'm going to do for today. So thank you everyone for tuning in. So remember, hopefully everyone saw the or keep in mind what on what slot that you're presenting on next week. I'm going to send the announcement right now, and make sure you're practicing and make sure you're ready for the presentation next week, because we got to go really fast. Okay. Okay, so I'll see you guys on Thursday, and thank you guys for tuning in.
Yeah, office hours today, right?
Yes, I have office hours right after this, 2:30.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Jonathan, did you have any more questions? Okay, so I'm going to sign off, and if you have any more questions, I'll be in office hours in a little bit.